NewsNation early anchor Nicole Burley spoke with Secretary Brad Raffensperger in a one-on-one interview earlier today.
Can we also just talk about the timing of this new law? Georgia, of course, just sent 2 Democrats to the Senate. You yourself found no widespread evidence of voter fraud in the last elections. Republicans are saying that this will ensure election integrity, but why make these changes now if there was no widespread voter fraud found or no evidence?
I ran in 2018 to move away from signature match, and that is a solid piece of reform. It's like I said, that they're using that right now in Minnesota, they're using that in Nebraska. So I think that is something that makes a lot of sense, and I support that fully. I also support fully, based on what we had with our runoff lasting 8 weeks, by going to ranked choice voting, we'll now be able to shorten that down to 4 weeks. And I think that's a really, wise, reform that we're doing there. I think some of the other stuff probably should have waited until other organizations. There are a lot of studies that are going on right now. What would be the best practice moving forward? I do think that removing the Secretary of State, what happens to me, but let's take the personalities out of it. I think by removing me from the state election board and having an unelected official who can fire a county election director is the wrong way to go. The chair of the state election board has been the Secretary of State for over 60 years. And I think that they will regret that decision.
Some, critics are pointing to reducing the number of drop boxes, specifically in urban areas, the whole providing of food and drink or not providing it to voters standing in line. Just talk about why were those changes necessary?
As it relates to the drop boxes, I would. At the end of the day, they would have had more drop boxes. I think that there should have been 1 drop box for every early voting location. But those were rules that I put in place as chair of the state election board last year during the pandemic, and they expired as soon as we finished the Senate runoff. They were not allowed in state law, so this General Assembly actually put them into law. It would have been preferable if they would have added additional ones, but to be 1 for every county. Last year, 38 counties did not have any. We have 159 counties. So this way, we'll now have 100% of all counties with absolutely no drop boxes.
But what about the counties that are less populated versus the ones that are more populated? 1 in each county does. Right. I mean, in theory, it sounds fair, but that doesn't mean it actually is in practice.
Well, it's also based on there'll be at least 1 drop box for every 100,000 voters. And so there'll be at least, it is population based, but obviously some counties will have fewer. And like I said, I wish, and I would have preferred if they would have allowed to see more absolutely valid drop boxes, 1 for every precinct that has early voting. It just makes it a lot more convenient for voters, but that's not what they did. This is the first time it's put in state law. I think that they'll come back and revisit that once they run an election and realize that probably would have made more sense doing it that way.
There have been calls for boycotts. We know that MLB has moved the All-Star game out of Atlanta, moving it now to Denver. What is your response to this? I mean, there is so much outrage over this law on both sides. Now people saying, let's boycott companies, let's boycott Delta, Coca-Cola, those type of things.
It's extremely unfortunate. Georgia laid out the welcome mat probably in the late 50s, early 60s, but we wanted to attract corporations and our homegrown companies such as Coca-Cola. Delta did come over here from Birmingham. We're so glad that they did come here. But we wanted to throw out the welcome mat to corporations because we understood how important jobs for Georgians are. And so we always want to make sure we have a pro-business environment here in Georgia. And so it's extremely unfortunate that this got tangled up in there. I would have hoped that the General Assembly would have reached out more and done more receiving input and talking and discussing this with our major business leaders. And now we're seeing some of the consequences of their lack of conversation with those officials.
So many people still do feel that the 2020 presidential election results were false. How do you feel that we as a nation can help restore some faith in our election system, in our democratic election system?
I sent Congress on January 6th a point-by-point rebuttal of every single point that was made. And we have the facts on our side. Unfortunately, on January 6th, something else was going on, so I don't know if they've ever read it. But if they would read it, and I would encourage everyone to go to the Secretary of State's website, download that letter. It's a 12-page letter, and read it point by point. And you'd have all the information that you would want. Are you disappointed? If you're a Republican, yes, you are. I was disappointed in those results. But the facts are that President Trump did not carry the state of Georgia. There was not a systemic fraud issue that would overturn results of the election. Those are the facts.
How does it make you feel knowing that there are so many people within your very own state who still feel that it was a fraud?
Well, a lot of times you have these myths that go on and on. It really helps when an attorney that's being sued for defamation, that her attorney then says in the filing that those claims were so over the top or outlandish. I forget the exact wording, but no one in their right mind would have believed it. The challenge is that good people did believe it, because typically we have good, decent, honest Americans that are honest with each other. They can't believe that someone would go out there in national media and just make stuff up. And so as that trial with Dominion versus these other people that are in these lawsuits, in that defamation suit, the truth will get out in deposition, and then you'll get the facts. And people need to read that, and then they'll get the hard truth. And if you're a Republican, it'll be disappointing. But at the end of the day, in Georgia, President Trump did not carry the state.